When I ask anyone what the scariest zombies map within Call of Duty Zombies ever is, 90% of the people will say Verrückt. Some might say Nakta and Toten, some might say Shinonuma. It will mainly be the older maps within COD Zombies, Kino perhaps, maybe 5. And you will notice in general, a lot of these scarier maps are also the smallest, the tightest, and the most difficult. Ones that don't have big open spaces, big areas for you to train the zombies, as we say. Maps where you really have to be on the higher end of the skill level in order to get to those higher rounds. In general, maps that are easier aren't as scary. Whether that's because they're less tense, you can relax more, but I think for the scariest zombies map we've ever had, Verrückt, there is a lot more that comes into play. Yes, whilst it is difficult, it is generally, in Call of Duty terms anyway, frightening. This was our second ever COD Zombies map, just coming off the back of Nakta and Toten. It released in 2009, and so being the next map, whilst you would think it would be an improvement, you wouldn't really expect too much since it's still the early days. But in my opinion, Verrückt implemented so much more than it needed to. You have to remember how simple Nakta and Toten was. There were no perks, 3 doors, no pack-a-punch, no wonder weapon besides from the ray gun. It was the bare bones of zombies. And being that this was the second map, I think Verrückt exceeded expectations. It introduced so many features that we see nowadays in zombies that have stuck. Verrückt gave us perks. Juggernaut, Quick Revive, Speed Cola, and Double Tap. Every single one of these was a game changer. All of a sudden, you could now go from taking 2 hits before you get downed to 4 hits. If you've ever played the earlier iterations of zombies, you will know how big of a difference that is. To most people, that means going from being able to survive to about round 10 to round 20, 30, 40 and so on. It made Verrückt a hell of a lot easier than what it would have been. Also, Quick Revive, you now had a second chance in zombies. If you went down, you could get back up. The third perk that it introduced was Speed Cola. I think one of the most underrated perks ever. Being able to reload your weapon faster, build up barriers quicker, can be the difference between life and death. And the fourth perk, Double Tap Root Beer, whilst it isn't as good as Double Tap 2.0, what we have today, like every perk that this map introduced, it is a game changer. They made what is a difficult map slightly easier, but also fairer, I would say. But that wasn't all Verrückt gave us. It also introduced the power switch, something that Nakta and Toten didn't have. This meant that you couldn't just buy perks on round 1, you couldn't just stay in the starting area, but you had to open up the map if you wanted to access everything. And another feature that shouldn't be overlooked is traps. Although simple, Verrückt gave us the electroshock defense. I'm going to be honest, I don't think it was the most useful thing, just because it wasn't really in an area where I would stay in Verrückt, but it went on to pave the way for the future. There were other small features that Verrückt introduced, like multiple mystery box locations, instead of just staying in one area like it did in Nakta and Toten. But this map really was revolutionary, and it was unique. There isn't another Call of Duty Zombies map 13 years later that did what Verrückt did, and that was have 2 starting areas. And this was one of the reasons why a few years back when this game was populated, every now and again, I would like to go back and play Verrückt, because the experience of having 2 different starting areas whilst playing with your friends or randoms, 2 players on one side, 2 players on the other side, is such a unique idea. Even on solo, you would start on the left, on the Juggernaut room, or the right, the Quick Revive room. It didn't make too much of a difference. Everyone had their own preference. I preferred starting on the left side, some people the right, but with friends doing the race to switch on the power first was a hell of a lot of fun. But the biggest one out of them all as to why Verrückt is so good is because of its horror aspect. It's set in an insane asylum, the atmosphere, the ambience, the sound design is impeccable, just being trapped inside of these small corridors whilst the undead break in from outside as they appear through the forest and enter the building that you can't escape from. It's really difficult to describe if you haven't played it for yourself, but if you put a headset on whilst you're just randomly walking around, you will hear noises in the background that you might not have heard before, that were so delicately placed in there by the Triarch employees and are so easy to miss, yet when you're playing, it's there in the background. A lot of the time you don't notice it, but it adds to the pressure.
4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42.
And just to add to the scariness, the Easter eggs that Verrückt gave us as well. Being that this was early on, World at War's Nectar and Toten had one Easter egg, but Verrückt gave us two more. The dentist chair, where you would hear a patient screaming from the past, and a baby crying. It's never been explained to us, and I wouldn't even want to imagine why this man was screaming on this dentist chair, what kind of experiments were they doing on him in this asylum, and also, why was this baby crying? Why was this baby even here in the first place? I absolutely love Verrückt. Whilst I'm not the best zombies player, for me to come back and play what is quite a difficult map, there's just something about it that I don't get from other maps. It's so different, whether it be how scary it is, whether it be the uniqueness of the two starting areas. I don't know, I've always liked it, and I do see a lot of comments of people saying, Verrückt is okay, but to me, I've always thought it was amazing. In terms of the story, we weren't quite there yet. Yes, years later, but back in 2009 when this came out for World at War, there were little hints here and there, but nothing really told to us. Just like Nectar and Toten, we were playing as 4 unknown Marines. Again, now we know who they are, but back then there wasn't a story around them. There were bits of writing on the walls here and there, this room especially, with the numbers, the symbols, the drawings, got a lot of people thinking. This is where the community started to come up with theories saying, well, actually, there might be some deeper meaning here that isn't being explained to us. But the overall story wasn't quite developed at this point. That was a little bit later on, but the map was. In the Black Ops version, we have the Winter's Howl. In other versions, we have the Wunderwaffe. In the original version for World at War, we only had the ray gun as the wonder weapon, which really only made it more difficult than it already was. I don't know, I've always loved Verrückt. It is a simple map, yet introduced so many features that are a major part of zombies today, and at the same time, unlike a lot of maps, you could say, well, Nectar and Toten wasn't that unique, or there are elements of Shi no Numa we've seen in other maps like, I don't know, Zetsubo no Shiba, but Verrückt is unique, and that's what I've always loved about it. It's a difficult map, it isn't for players who like big open areas and like to train, it's an experience that you're not going to get playing any of the other 30 plus zombies maps that we have. This played a major role in the evolution of zombies, and I don't think there's a bad part to it. Zombies would not be what it is today without Verrückt.